You know, I know we, want to have early success. Who doesn't? But the reality of it is I know I have my work cut out for me.
Duke dominates in Durham. The Owls drop their season opener in a blowout.
Plus, we sit down with Keith Grawler covering Lafayette football for the Allentown Morning Call.
And I'm Sam Massad, live from Room 110, where we'll talk about how fans from home rooted for the Owls on the road. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome to Inside the Nest. I'm Emelie Cochrane alongside Luke Milai. We've got lots going on today. Without a doubt, a packed show.
The Owls kicked the season off with a shutout loss against Duke. We've got the video and some toll receipts to prove it.
There was a sparse crowd on a Friday night at Wallace Wade Stadium. Temple and Duke headed into their Week 1 matchups with brand new head coaches. However, only one of these teams had the right mindset to get going right away. Duke began the opening drive at the 25-yard line, driving the ball down the field for an early touchdown by running back Jalen Coleman. Temple followed with its first drive of the season, which resulted in a 3-and-out. In the second quarter, Duke kept it going on offense, building that momentum off of that initial touchdown. Temple could not keep up. Riley Leonard led the Blue Devils as they went 72 yards in 7 plays. Leonard finally capped it off, passing to Jordan Moore to make it 17-0. The Owls were not able to get going on offense and remained pointless throughout the first half.
You said Temple couldn't keep up. Well, Duke didn't let up. On the ensuing possession following that overthrow, Leonard led an 86-yard drive all through the air. It was the most passing yards he had on any individual drive, which he capped off with a 39-yard touchdown down the near sideline to Samir Hagans. This made it a 24-0 game, which was the score at the half. The Owls offense found some life in the first drive of the second half, where it had 3 first downs. That was more than the entire first half combined, where they had just 2 first downs to Duke's 17. But it was turnovers that doomed the offense in the third quarter. Ahmad Anderson had one of 2 Temple fumbles in the quarter, which accounted for the only 2 turnovers of the game. The Leonard train kept rolling for Duke, this time on the ground. The sophomore added 64 yards with his legs. He was also the leading rusher for Duke. And with over 9 minutes left in the game, Quincy Patterson entered for Temple at quarterback, completing 3 of 8 passes for 31 yards. Temple was shut out for the first time since 2007 as the Owls dropped the season opener in Durham 30-0.
Looking at the game's box score, it only took the Blue Devils a little over 2 minutes to end the anticipation Owls fans had entering the game. During the post-game presser, Stan Drayton said that the goal was to perform a clean operation. But with an entire offseason to prep for this opener, the team still made many of the same mistakes as last season. As mentioned, it ended in Temple's first shutout loss since 2007.
And, I don't think that we really showed up in the first half, but the one positive thing that we can take from it is that we showed up in the second half, which, defense did a phenomenal job holding Duke to field goals, and, that's something that we can build off of. But, quite simply, put that we just got a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do. We wanted to try to get as many guys in the game as we possibly could. We're trying to learn our football team. We're trying to see how guys operate under pressure.
There's a lot of self-inflicted wounds that are very easily fixable, but just requires a lot of detail, a lot of hard work during the week to fix those. So I think we had a good game plan. I trusted what our coaches had, and I think they put something really good together. I just think it was a lot of self-inflicted stuff on our own that we need to get in the film room and just fix.
Those were the Owls' post-game thoughts on their performance against Duke. But now our thoughts. Luke, what you got?
Emily, my first thought comes, the defensive line didn't do enough in this game. We talked about it extensively last week that Duke quarterback Riley Leonard was making his second career collegiate start. This was a guy where if you could get any pressure on him at all, he would be uncomfortable. And lo and behold, he throws 15 for 15 to start the game. That's a guy who's very comfortable. Any quarterback at any level, if they're that comfortable, they can perform like that. And that's what Riley Leonard did. The Owls got one sack later in the game, courtesy of Darian Varner, but at that point it was too little too late for Temple.
Absolutely. And sticking with the defense, the two words I would like to use to describe Temple defense right now, slow and just very unproductive. I mean, they were consistently getting burnt by Duke's offense. There were a ton of missed tackles going on there. The first man was never even able to make the tackle in that sense. But overall, just a very sloppy defensive operation. Not to mention cornerback Dominic Hill. You know, he had many penalties in the first half, which set the Owls back a lot. So I think overall, the Owls just need to get more athletic. They need to get faster. They need to get stronger, because if they want to be able to keep up with these teams going into conference play, they're going to need to step up a little bit.
And you mentioned sloppy defense. Well, the Owls as a whole weren't helped out by their sloppy return play, and that falls a lot on the shoulders of Ahmad Anderson, the punt returner and kick returner for Temple. In the punt game, he had a punt where he returned it for negative yards, probably should have fair caught it or tried to go up the field as opposed to going side to side. And then on a kickoff later in the game, he took it out to the 18-yard line, cost Temple about 7 yards when they could have got it on the 25. So Ahmad, it was a rough day for him. We saw him fumble in the highlights, so hopefully he can step up from here, but it was a rough day for him in the return game.
Absolutely.
The loss moves the Owls to 0-1 on the season, but it also puts them at the top of a dreadful list. Temple now has the longest active losing streak in the country among all 130 FBS teams. This streak is made up of the final 7 games last season and the first in 2022. The Owls' last win came on October 2nd, 2021 in a 34-31 win over Memphis.
With Temple's losing streak still up and running, Luke and I are here to break down 2 plays where the Owls needed to play smarter and harder. Luke, what you got?
Well, my first play is from Duke's first drive of the game. This is just Riley Leonard's second completion, a 52-yard pass to Jordan Moore that he took to the 1. So we're going to see it and stop it right here. Jordan Moore's the man at the bottom of the screen. He came in motion, and he's got an immediate mismatch. He's going up against Mahim McCargo, who is a safety this season, but he transitioned from a linebacker. That's still an advantage for Duke with a wide receiver going against a former linebacker. Now you can start it again. Riley Leonard rolls out to his right and stop it right here before the throw. Leonard has 6+ yards of open space. I mentioned the defense didn't make him uncomfortable, and this is another example of that. Yes, he's rolling to his right, but a college quarterback at this level is going to make that throw, especially when there's that mismatch. We can roll it again. So Jordan Moore is able to get open down the sideline against McCargo, and then he just makes men miss. And that was another issue that Emily mentioned in this game, sloppy tackling until Jalen McMurray is able to stop him at the 1, but he just delayed the inevitable before Duke scored the touchdown.
All right, my turn. This next play, Dwan Mathis hands the ball over to Adonicus Sanders. You can play it right now. He runs down, gains 5 yards, and then they go right into a no huddle, going and deciding to run an unsuccessful play on 3rd and 2 right here. If you keep it playing, we can look at the lineup next. Keep going and stop right here. As you can see, this slot receiver right here, he is completely wide open. There's no one on him. Why not change the audible, pass it to him, and don't go for this unsuccessful run play? It just seems pointless to me. And then right after, Temple decides to punt the ball. They don't go for the 4th down. I mean, I just don't understand where this playmaking comes in. They're down 24 points. They're on the 50-yard line. This is one of their strongest drives of the day. Just go for it at that point.
I would have gone for it too if I were Stan Drayton. We learned he was going to have a lot of big decisions to make this season.
Absolutely.
So Week 1's blowout loss to Duke was Stan Drayton's first game as a head coach. After the loss, his focus was less on the result of the game and more on how the Owls will develop in a rebuilding season. Stan Drayton was hired last December as the 29th head coach in Temple football's history. Drayton began his 29th season as a football coach with his first game as a head coach, a blowout loss to Duke in Durham. Drayton knows the Owls have an uphill battle ahead of them this season, beyond the 30-point loss to the Blue Devils.
Quite simply, we just got a lot of work to do.
Temple was shut out for the first time since 2007 and allowed over 300 passing yards. It wasn't the start Drayton wanted, but the 51-year-old acknowledged the team's turnaround won't happen overnight.
I know we want to have early success, but the reality of it is I knew I had my work cut out for me.
Earlier this week, Stan Drayton said he'd be fighting his emotions leading up to the kickoff of his first game as head coach. He was happy with how he handled himself tonight, but recognizes his team has a lot of growing to do.
You got to endure tough times. We're going to have our highs and we're going to have our lows. And I have to be controlled and I have to be optimistic and I have to stay positive.
There's a lot of the self-inflicted wounds that that are very easily fixable, but just requires a lot of detail, a lot of hard work.
The Owls have not won their season opener since 2019. Drayton and his players pointed out there are extra mental challenges that come with the first game.
I think our guys were, in some sense evaluating as opposed to just cutting it loose, and probably overthinking some things. And that's what we need to find out.
First game jitters, trusting your technique, trusting what your job is, and if you do that, it gives you the ability to cut it loose.
The Owls will be able to put those first game jitters behind them when they host Lafayette at the Link in front of a home crowd on Saturday.
And that's where we're heading. After this break, we'll hear from head coach Stan Drayton on the Duke loss.
But more importantly, Drayton will talk about the upcoming game versus the Leopards from Easton, PA, when Inside the Nest returns.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Stan Drayton hosted a press conference earlier this week to discuss Duke and preview Lafayette.
He talks about the team's mentality after the tough loss and where the quarterback competition stands.
What you mentioned, on Friday, your team wasn't cutting it loose as much. What can you do, going into this week? Make the guys more relaxed going inside.
Well, the one thing I love about our guys is they're disappointed. They're hard on themselves right now. They've worked so hard to get to that point, to that opportunity, and they didn't play up to their standard. Obviously they didn't play to the coach's standard, but they're holding themselves to a standard, which to me that's a little bit of ownership starting to be built amongst themselves. So I was excited to see them respond that way. Just getting back to the purpose of who we are and what this thing is all about. For us, our purpose is to play for the love of your brother. And if you're playing for the man next to you, you have a tendency to handle adversity that much better. So that's what we're getting back to. Just had to remind them, hey, this is why we're doing this. You've worked your butt off, you've prepared well. All you need to do is just cut it loose, play with passion.
Duane was one. You had Quincy come in during the fourth quarter, get some game reps. Do you see Duane, or do you have Duane being the starter for Lafayette?
And I'll remind you one more time, it's competition every day. Okay, so, it wasn't like Duane was demoted during the midst of the game. That wasn't the case at all. It gave us an opportunity. That game gave us an opportunity to get to know who our players were in a pressure situation. So we had an opportunity to get Quincy in the ball game to see how he was going to respond. So that was the reason for that.
Talking about competition, you got a lot of your running backs in there, especially like Jakari getting in third downs as a pass-catching running back. You talked about how you saw how they played and Jakari being a pass-catching tailback for you guys.
He dropped a couple balls, I think, during the course of the game. So, really that rotation last week with the running backs was to give all those guys an opportunity to play so we can evaluate who they are during the course of the game. If you, watch the game, every single one of those backs had an opportunity to play on third down. I just wanted to see who was going to protect the quarterback, who can be that receiving back for us, but we're not going to just throw the ball to the back on third down. We'll throw the ball to the back on any down.
Your team coming into this week doesn't overlook a program like Lafayette, an FCS program. How do you make sure their focus is there?
Locking in on us. we have our own issues, you know what I mean? And again, we're playing against Temple again, and Temple beat Temple. Not to take credit away from Duke. Duke played, they played a style of football to win that ball game, no doubt about it. But we can definitely play a lot better, and we need to really start focusing in on those things, how we can get out there and put a better display of who we are as a football team. So we can't take.
A lot to take away from part one of that presser, but Emily, what did Coach Drayton say that stuck out to you the most?
So the first thing that I really appreciated was that Coach Drayton credited Duke for the style of football they played, because it was so much better than what Temple did, obviously, so he's got to give them some credit there. But he also said that in the end, like you mentioned earlier, it's Temple versus Temple. It's always going to be Temple versus Temple. They can't keep looking at these tougher opponents and getting defeated before they even hit the field. At that point, they just really need to focus on themselves, focus on the mentality of this new team, focus on the positivity that Stan Drayton is bringing to this team, and just kind of go for it and don't look back. He said cut loose. And I do have a quote written down. He said, play with a purpose, have fun, cut it loose. Your purpose is playing for the love of your brother, prepare to win and expect to win. Having that optimistic mindset from a coach is helpful for a team that's been defeated for so long.
Yeah, cutting it loose and saying to focus on Temple is something that I think he's preached time and time again, and it's really relevant coming into this week against an opponent, an FCS opponent like Lafayette, that the Owls should be able to take care of. But I also wanted to focus on, he talked about the QBs and if there was a controversy there. He said there's no controversy. He said he just wanted to get Quincy in the game, and he said that post-game, and he said it now. He wanted to just get as many guys in the game as he could. He also said it about the running backs, Jakari Norwood, Edward Sadie, all the guys that are in the backfield there. So I think right now it's, for Stan Drayton, it's a lot about just learning what he has. Obviously, that was his first game. He said first game jitters for all his players, but he might have had first game jitters himself, so he's just got to learn what he has, and that's really what I took from him.
Absolutely, I agree. Those first game jitters are definitely real for everybody with a new coach coming in. But, all right, let's take a closer look at part two of Stan Drayton's presser. He talks about having an extra day to prepare for game two, about player evaluations, and gives us some thoughts on what Lafayette brings to the table.
The extra day this week to prepare now, but we got one extra day.
Well, Lafayette didn't send us the film early, so we got the film at the same time, and, we were able to get our players, recovery. Those guys were able to get in here and take care of their bodies. I was able to meet with the leadership committee and talk through some things, and, our coaches were able to kind of reflect and really study the film and self-scout ourselves and evaluate our talent. That was the beauty of the extra day, was to evaluate our roster, see who showed up, see who didn't, see what we can do better as a coaching staff to help our players have better success on the football field. So that's pretty much how we handled that day.
Coach, you mentioned Coach, you mentioned watching Lafayette's defense, seeing them fly around. Did you see anything from the offensive side of them that stood out or anything?
Yeah, they got a couple of running backs that are shifty. They're not easy to tackle. You could tell the quarterback is a pretty good quarterback, and I think that Lafayette applied a lot of pressure to him, kind of put him in some tough spots. I think they're an offense that you just can't take for granted because of those running backs are so good, and they're physical up front, and again that quarterback, and he could do some things. So.
The vertical passing game sort of does not present itself. I don't remember DeJuan sort of ever getting anything more than 10, 15 yards downfield. Well,
this is a matter of just getting in a rhythm, right? If you're not having success on first down, you're calling an off-schedule second down play, and we're playing a battle of field position type of football, and obviously. That is in our package to throw the vertical ball, but it just didn't present itself this week.
Can you just talk about this 3-game homestand you guys are having? It's pretty rare to have 3 consecutive weeks at home, and you talked about how excited you are to be back at Financial for the first time. Isn't that, what are your thoughts on that?
Everything's the first time right now, so it'll be my first time coaching in Lincoln Financial, and, getting the chance to get around our band, our cheerleaders, our fans, and, all that stuff's going to be pretty awesome, and we'll get in the routine, routines are a little different when we go from away to home, but, we'll get in the routine and prepare ourselves like any other game, that respect. But to sit there and be in front of your home crowd, that's going to be special for us. So I'm very excited.
This is what's coming in two things. This is what's coming next.
That made the travel squad.
Yeah.
Right? Is that something they earned in camp?
Absolutely. Yeah. They've earned it at some point, and, they're ready to play. You know, we don't sit there and base playing time based on classification. You know, and those guys had their equipment on. If something were to happen where they need to go in there and help us win ball games, we expect them to be ready. So yeah, they earned it.
Every football-related event you guys have had since you got the job, Arthur Johnson's been right there on the ground. Can you talk about what it means to have him around and so supportive and invested into your program and the confidence that it gives you?
Yeah, you know, that's a athletic director and a vice president that has been around the game of football his whole life. He knows football. You know, he sees the reality. He understands the development. He understands the time it takes. You know, and that's always great to have around. You know, you're asking, I'm being asked real football questions, you know, from Arthur. And, you know, that's always refreshing when you have an AD that really gets the game.
That was part 2 of Stan Drayton's press conference. Luke, what were your thoughts?
Well, one thing that stuck out to me, we've heard Stan Drayton say that they've got to focus on themselves, and he finally gave us some insight of what that's provided. He talked about DeJuan Mathis and the Owls not being able to get the vertical ball going against Duke, and he said it was more of a product of being behind the sticks on first down, not really getting productive plays, so they can't afford to just launch the ball down the field. They've got to try and dink their way up the field. So that was one thing that stuck out to me, and then he started to preview Lafayette. He talked about how defense is their strength. He talked about how he enjoys their running backs. He gave credit to their quarterback, but I think that was more him being nice. I think the real focus of Lafayette is their running backs and their defense. So I think that's what they're going to look ahead to. And he was also just happy to get home. He's happy to be in front of everybody, the cheerleaders, and they've got a 3-game homestand coming up. So I think they're going to learn a lot about themselves and be able to get into a routine.
Absolutely. And something else that he said that nearly half of Temple starters have never played Temple football before, obviously. But if you look at the roster, 50% of this team has collegiate experience. They have played a college football game before. So although, you know, these guys are disappointed and stuff like that, and I get that it's hard to come out week 1 with a defeat, I just think that it's a bit of an excuse. Nonetheless, I do know that a lot of these guys do have that collegiate experience, but nonetheless, I'm excited to see. I know that they were disappointed last game. Obviously, it wasn't the standard that they wanted to be held to, but I'm excited to see them home. I'm excited to see what they do on, you know, at the link. I'm excited to cheer them on myself. I can't be, you know, unbiased here, but you know what I mean. All right, it's time to take our second break of the day, but when we come back, we'll hear from a special guest giving an outside opinion from Easton, PA.
Morning Call reporter Keith Grawler gives his insight on Lafayette when Inside the Nest returns. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Temple welcomes Lafayette to the link this week for the second game of the season. These teams haven't met since 1965 in a game that the Owls won 27-12. The Leopards are 1-0 this season after a 6-0 win over Sacred Heart in Week 1.
If you bet the under, good choice. The Leopards defense, expected to be a powerhouse this year, came up with big plays throughout the game. However, both teams lacked momentum on offense, remaining scoreless throughout the entire first half. Freshman QB Ryan Schuster ended that from 18 yards out to rush in for his first career touchdown, which happened to be the only one of the day from either team. Sacred Heart had 3 opportunities from the 1-yard line in the final seconds, but never got in. Lafayette ends it in a close shutout, 6-0.
Now, when you have a matchup between teams that haven't played in 57 years, sometimes you have to go to the other side for some up-to-date information.
Absolutely, and we talked to the Allentown Morning Call's Keith Grawler, Lafayette's football reporter, and he discussed the Leopards' dominant defense and what it would mean to the program to stay competitive.
All right, so I'll just start. Pretty simple. What do you think are some of the strengths of this Leopards team?
No doubt about it. It's the defense. They come up with a stellar effort on opening day. The offense sputtered mightily against Sacred Heart, fortunate to get 6 points on the board, but the defense saved the day. It's a strong defensive unit. We knew that coming in, and they certainly played like the veteran group in that season opener against Sacred Heart.
And you mentioned that these guys are excited to be headed to Philadelphia, but what are your personal predictions heading into this Week 2 matchup?
I think the important thing for Lafayette this week, not necessarily to win the game, although that would be unbelievably great. It would be one of the biggest wins in program history, for sure. I think the goal here, though, is to be more competitive, to clean up so many of the problems that plague them, especially offensively against Sacred Heart. Obviously, a win would be unbelievable, but they'll take a competitive, much cleaner effort than the one they had in week 1.
Now, if they are going to be competitive, who are some guys on either side of the ball that you think are going to have to stand out or you've seen stand out that would make this a competitive game?
They need a bunch of guys, but number one, of course, has got to be the freshman quarterback. Great to get a win, but he's got to play better if this team is going to make strides coming off a 3-8 season in 2021.
Are there any storylines that you're watching out for, whether it's for this matchup or just for the Leopards in general, that kind of stand out to you that we could maybe see this weekend?
Going into last weekend, I still think it is going to be a storyline throughout the course of the season is the new coach. John Troxel is a local guy. That is the number one storyline. That's the number one storyline. Troxel coming home to energize a program that, quite frankly, has been down for many, many years. It used to be a team that would win 6, 7, 8 games a season. They're trying to turn the page. They're trying to turn the corner, enter a new era. And this game on Saturday, if they could be competitive and they could take Temple into the fourth quarter, people would step up and say, man, John's got something going on at Lafayette.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, last question from both of us. So for our show, we usually give a game score prediction. So can you just give us some numbers that you think are going to come out of this game?
I'm going to go something like 28-13 Temple in this game. And I'm looking forward to what should be hopefully a competitive game and a great atmosphere for the Lafayette Leopards.
It was a pleasure talking to Keith, one of Lafayette's most experienced reporters.
And so now that Keith has us all on the same page about the Leopards, let's take a look at what Temple needs to do to get in the win column on Saturday. So we're heading back to the toolbox, and my first tool for the Owls is to dominate in the passing game. This should be a chance for DeJuan Mathis to find his rhythm. He only had 83 passing yards against what's supposed to be a bad Duke defense. And while Keith mentioned that defense is the strength of the Leopards, they allowed over 250 passing yards to Sacred Heart. So in this game, against this opponent, passing yards, even for just 200, should be more than enough to win and also to boost the confidence of DeJuan Mathis.
Absolutely. And my two tools will focus on the lines, but the first one is simple. Pressure the QB. The Owls made it way too easy for Riley Leonard to carve through the defense. After each snap, he had enough time in the pocket to complete almost all plays successfully. They need to apply pressure, and more pressure, of course. Lafayette's QB is a true freshman. Temple needs to make it hard for him to pass the ball and find his rhythm.
Now, my next tool is to take a note from Stan Drayton's book, Focus on Temple. Drayton has once again preached this in nearly every press conference. We saw it again this week. And it's never been more relevant than it is in this game. The Owls are taking on an FCS opponent that they should handle with ease. The game plan this week should be focused more on what Temple can improve on rather than what Lafayette brings to the table themselves. And in the Owls' lone game against an FCS opponent last year, they dominated a 41-7 win over Wagner, and DeJuan Mathis showed out. He had one of his best games of the season, threw for 292 passing yards and 2 touchdowns.
Absolutely. And tool number 4 focuses on the other line. The big guys need to protect DeJuan Mathis at all costs. Like last season, he had barely any time to regroup and initiate the play after the snap. Protection is the key. The more, the better. But there's no doubt that DeJuan has to work on staying composed and not getting flustered during pressured situations. A well-rounded offense is what we need to see in week 2.
Now, my final tool for Temple offense is to game plan around Sekou White, the sophomore defensive back for the Leopards. He won Patriot League Defensive Player of the Week. He's a guy that can change an entire game. He led Lafayette with a team-high 12 tackles last week, including the tackle on that goal line stand to win the game 6-0 over Sacred Heart. And he also had a big play during the midst of that game, forced a fumble, one of 2 turnovers forced by the Leopards defense in that game. So he showed his ability to make game-altering plays for his team. Temple needs to keep the ball away from White at all costs. And we'll see if these tools are put to use on Saturday, September 10th at the Link when the Leopards come to town. The first of 4 matchups against cat mascots this season. At the new and improved 2 p.m. start time, you can watch on ESPN+. Follow along with us on Twitter at @OwlSportsUpdate.
It's break time. Coming up later in the show, we go no huddle with game predictions. But first,
I'm Sam Massad, live in room 110. Inside on Friday, there is a week 1 football watch party held to kick off the season. I'll take you there when Inside the Nest returns.
It's not an easy ride to North Carolina. So over the weekend, a watch party was hosted at the Student Center for students to watch the game, eat free food, and play lots of games. Let's send it over to Inside the Nest reporter Sam Massad to tell us more. Hey, Sam.
Thanks, Emily. Opening night was a tough road trip for students. Hundreds of miles away on a Friday night leading into a holiday weekend. But students had the chance to gather together in the Student Center this past weekend to cheer on the Owls versus Duke. I spoke to a few eager Owl fans on how they felt about the start of the season, as well as some 2022 predictions. For a third straight year, Temple opened the season on the road. On Saturday, it was a 6-hour trip south to Durham, North Carolina. However, this does not stop Owls fans at home from supporting their team.
Really excited for the whole season. Really excited to watch Temple play.
The main campus programs board partnered up with Temple Athletics this past Friday to put together a football watch party for Owl fans on campus. The event featured free food and a night full of bingo to win numerous prizes, ranging from Lego sets, neon signs, to all sorts of Temple merchandise.
It was football because our first game was an away game, and we did partner with our athletics for the watch party, for the food, and then for some of our giveaways. Football also pitched in.
Students from all grades gathered with their friends to see Temple kick off the season. I spoke to a few fans to see how they feel about the team this year.
Hope we win a couple more games this year. Hopefully we'll do well.
Maybe like 3 wins, hopefully. I mean, that's better than my high school did, so.
I think we're going to fall a little under 500, but, that's hopeful. You know what I mean? New coach, so new energy. It should be a lot of fun.
Yes, it ended with an opening day loss, but it's the beginning of a new year, and Temple fans were just happy to spend it together. Despite Temple's shutout loss, the crowd stayed nearly the entire game, having a turnout of nearly 200 people. Reporting from the newsroom, I'm Sam Massad. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Sam. It's now time for a fan favorite segment.
For the second time this season, it's time to go no huddle. So for the first question, Emily, what are you most looking forward to with the home opener on Saturday?
Absolutely. So for me, it's just being back on the sidelines at the link. As a member of the cheer team, I get one of the most action-packed seats in the stadium, and it happens to be right in between the student section and the field. Although I can't be biased on this show, I'm excited to cheer for the Owls this upcoming Saturday. Hopefully Temple can put some points on the board this week against the Leopards.
That excitement, that's why Stan Drayton called you out earlier. He said he's excited to see everybody, but I'm excited for there to be a little juice in the link. Last season, when they went on that 7-game losing streak to end the season, they had some low attendance games. But with every new season, there's a lot of newfound optimism in every fan base. And this is a game that the Owls should win against an FCS opponent. So this should be a good day for the program as a whole. It's because they can get themselves off the longest losing streak in the country.
All right, so here's a quick look at our predictions from last week. I'll start since I'm the only one who got it wrong. But like Luke said last week, he only got it 1 point off last week, so I marked this as a clean slate in my mind. There's always next week.
Emily, when we look at this, all I see is a W, and that's what it goes in the book for me. Me, Jake, and Sam all got it right, and that's what matters in my mind.
All right, so for question 2, we made our predictions last week. Let's do it again for week 2. I'm hoping my prediction is closer than last week's, but even with Temple's performance against Duke, I'm sticking with the Owls 24-7. Statistically, they have a stronger roster with 50% of these guys having some sort of collegiate experience that I mentioned earlier. I'm just hoping they can execute what Stan Drayton says they need to work on. If they lose this game, it'll be a bad look for the program and a rude awakening come conference play.
Keith told us a win for the Leopards would be one of the biggest wins in our program history, so I think for Temple's sake, they're hoping it goes their way. So I've got Temple winning 28-10 this week. I think the defense locks in against the Lafayette offense that produced just 8 passing yards this past week against Sacred Heart. 8 passing yards. And I'm looking for DeJuan Mathis to dominate through the air and the Owls to score their first points of the season, maybe even in the first quarter, where they haven't scored a first quarter touchdown since week 2 of last season. So we've got a sweep here in the studio, so let's bring it around broad and hear what Sam and Jake have to say about this week 2 matchup.
I'm going to have to agree with you guys and go Temple 21-3. You know, the Owls, they had a really bad loss, and I think they're going to redeem themselves this week when they're finally home in their home opener and having all the fans around them. It's a great environment to start to get some points going.
Well, Sam, I have a low-scoring affair in my prediction. However, I have Temple beating Lafayette 20-3.
All our predictions, but it's time for our final break of the day.
Another member of the Meli Mobile will join the show when we return. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Now, we brought in a few experts already today, so let's wrap things up on the Leopards with one last guest.
We now turn it over to Owl Sports Update, Eric Jessberger, to statistically speak on this Week 2 matchup against Lafayette. Hey, Eric.
Thanks, Emily and Luke. The Owls head into Week 2 seeking their first win of the season. The same, however, can't be said for their Week 2 opponent, as the Lafayette Leopards are off to a 1-0 start. Much like Temple, the Leopards had a tough time putting points on the board, but their one touchdown was enough for the win over Sacred Heart 6-0. Lafayette's defense was the key to the Leopards' Week 1 victory. They totaled 3 sacks for 21 yards lost and prevented Sacred Heart from scoring on both of the red zone appearances. Still, Lafayette's defense did allow more than 250 yards through the air in Week 1. So with productive offensive drives led by Dwan Mathis, Temple can put themselves into scoring positions. However, it's Lafayette's defense in the red zone that may be Temple's biggest challenge to overcome in Week 2.
So, Eric, you mentioned the Owls can get into scoring positions against Lafayette, but what's going to be the key to paying those off and finishing those opportunities?
Well, Luke, I believe the key to putting productive plays and converting in the end zone will be putting reliance in your backfield and having a stronger performance on the offensive line. Driving up the middle will allow for more success, more plays down the field, and you also want to avoid as many of those vertical and lateral options that we saw the Owls have some trouble with moving right to left in the backfield.
Now, I want to give credit to Eric before he's done for the day. Eric and I, once again, took the Meli Mobile down to Duke, to Durham, North Carolina, and Eric had the best play of the day. He got us out of about an hour of traffic to save us plenty of time. Eric, I need to make sure you got your props.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate it. Might have been the best play of the night, but hey, we have Week 2 coming up and a little homestand, so we don't got to travel as much coming up, Luke.
No, we're good to go.
I was happy I didn't have to travel at all. I sat on my couch all weekend. But all right, let's take a look at our fall lineup this semester. Owl Sports Update will have its first show of the school year this Thursday. Make sure to tune in to TUTV, where Eric Jessberger and Matt Rainier will give you all things Temple sports. On Mondays, our sports brief airs on social. And of course, we are here on Tuesdays with Inside the Nest, also at noon. That will do it for this edition of Inside the Nest. We hope you have a wonderful weekend ahead.
For Emily, our show producers Meli and Jake Jessberger, along with the entire crew, have a safe day. We'll be back on Thursday to preview what the Owls did against the Leopards.